Good morning, everyone. Today, it's my pleasure to speak with Father Greg Schenden. And Father Schenden is director of our university's campus ministry. And he has served in this role since 2018. And before that was Catholic chaplain here for a number of years. So Greg, thank you for taking the time to be with us this morning. Let's get started. Our tradition as a Catholic and Jesuit university includes a deep commitment to interreligious engagement and collaboration. And that commitment is at the core of our campus ministry. Would you share a little bit about campus ministry and about our chaplains, our retreat programming, and as a Jesuit, what perspective you bring to this work?
Sure. And just to start things off, President DeJoy, thank you for the opportunity and the invitation just to chat today. It's a privilege to be able to do so today. In terms of campus ministry and really the interfaith aspect of campus ministry at Georgetown, we're unique, not better or worse, we're unique at Georgetown, and many are familiar, but it's a story worth just simply reiterating. You know, if you go back to our founding and to the actual, the proposal by John Carroll from 1787 for the Academy on the Potomac, there's that line in there, and I have a copy of it hanging in my office. You know, there's a line and it's in all upper caps, you know, saying that students of all religious professions, traditions, will be admitted to the Academy and will be, I paraphrase here, will be encouraged to live out, to practice the faith traditions of their families. 1787, you know, a Catholic priest founding a school with that kind of principle is unique. People often think, you know, when we talk interfaith, this is something that comes out of Vatican II and more recent. No, this was occurring prior to that. What was it about John Carroll uniquely that was the impetus for him to do so? Well, really, you know, as you know, him growing up in the Maryland colony as a Catholic, he was on the receiving end of religious persecution as a Catholic and had to eventually travel to the continent, to Europe, to get educated. And it really, part of what that was about was really, he recognized if he was going to open Georgetown, this academy on the Potomac, it was going to be made available to all religious traditions. So really, it's very much in keeping with our tradition at Georgetown, but with our larger tradition in terms of really cura personals for an entire community. And that's been a really exciting part as being director of campus ministry. I think as a Jesuit in formation, Jack, we study a lot about interreligious dialogue and various faith traditions. The academic is wonderful. It's the actual lived experience and founded in relationships. You know, if you look at our department, my colleagues and my friends, you know, throughout the department, it's that relational aspect that has really been such a gift for me personally, but also I think for all of us in the department and the work we do as a department really shines through.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, in March of last year, we transitioned to a virtual learning environment and telework, and campus ministry quickly began to stream a live broadcast of Sunday Mass from Dahlgren Chapel. Could you describe how campus ministry transitioned to its programming online?
It was very quick. I mean, we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of all of that. And that was, of course, as you all know, during spring break. And a lot of folks were not here in the office during spring break, but there was kind of a bit of a skeleton crew that we were here in the offices during that week. And we all kind of set up shop in my office and we called it the bunker. And we were just kind of brainstorming as to, okay, how do we take everything we do and somehow transition it to a virtual environment? And at that time, and we continued to talk even prior, but during that moment, as Georgetown, we were talking about instructional continuity. The phrase came up over the course of that week about spiritual continuity, and that's been something that has run through these months, living this new existence. But it was just a matter of, well, how do we do this? And fortunately, we have the resources. Specifically, I'll just, you talk about that very first Mass, that very first Sunday at the end of spring break. With the renovations of Dahlgren a few years ago, we're fortunate to have a great video system built into Dahlgren Chapel that we've used for plenty of other events and sacred lectures. We didn't know we'd be using it for something like this, but it was an incredible gift that we had it. And we immediately said, okay, well, let's see if we can pull together a Mass virtually for this first Sunday. In a very different environment, in an empty, as you know, you were present for many of those Masses as a lector, in that virtual environment with the two blue lights of the cameras in the back of Dahlgren Chapel, which was a reminder of all those who were coming together virtually at the table.
Now, there are now select in-person services closely adhering to public health guidelines. Can you talk about what it's meant to continue to sustain a faith community and adapt our practices in these different environments? How are you and your colleagues in campus ministry helping to support and guide our members of our community?
Sure. It's obviously it's not the ideal, and I think if you talk to anybody in my department, the one thing we all say is we miss, like with everybody in the university, but especially so much of what we do in campus ministry is in person, right? It's between liturgies and other religious services, as well as spiritual conversation. That being said, folks in the department are incredibly mindful of, well, how do we make something that we've had to adapt, fewer people, still make it a really prayerful experience. One example, Jack, that I'll give you just occurred, at the beginning as we started Lent, was we did have Ash Wednesday services, and we did, following all guidelines, provide ashes at a few points throughout the course of the day and evening, using the new way of sprinkling ashes on the top of the head rather than on the forehead. But Dr. Jim Wickman, who's our director of Catholic life here at Georgetown, really was, he has a great gift, and it's his area in terms of liturgy, really wanted it to be a very, very sacred experience, not just, oh, come and get your ashes. So Dahlgren Quad was set up so that we had a couple of stations for the ashes, but he said, why don't we have music playing that will foster a prayerful atmosphere, so it's not just come get your ashes, but you're really moving into that Lenten experience. That's just one example, I think, across the board in terms of what all of our directors of the various faith tradition chaplaincies are doing. I think of, back, last fall semester with Brahmachari, adapting Diwali to a virtual atmosphere. You were part of that. Not the same experience, but can we still create a sacred experience with these new qualifications?
Sure. Well, you mentioned Lent. Members of our community will soon observe Ramadan, celebrate Passover, and celebrate Holi. How is campus ministry planning to support different faith traditions at Georgetown and marking these religious holidays this year?
Sure. A lot of conversation going on once again about how everybody's adapting. And again, it's not the ideal, obviously. I was just talking to one of our Muslim students last week about Ramadan itself, and she was talking about the notion of the breaking of the fast, iftar, at the end of the day, and how she said what she misses is that in-person iftar, which we normally host. We are, and Imam could tell you more at length, but it's trying to adapt these things virtually, yet still kind of foster some, that sacred experience at the heart of it all. I just have to mention, Jack, our students play such a large role in all of this as well. And that's so much in keeping with, I think, our arching philosophy within campus ministry, and it's very much rooted in our Ignatian tradition. At the root of the exercise is spiritual freedom. Part of that is obviously empowerment, and to see our students being formed in their faith traditions has been a huge part of normal life here at Georgetown, but certainly in this past year, in this unique moment about empowering our students in their faith lives and to be the ones to carry that to others coming into the community.
Sure. Now, when we think about the season of Lent, now our second Lenten season during the pandemic, can you offer a few thoughts about your reflections and your approach to Lent this year? What are some of the ideas that are guiding you in this holy time?
Thanks. That's a great question. And I would say it's very different from last Lent or Lents prior to that for me. This is not original, but this past year really has seemed like one long Lent in many ways, where a lot has been given up, right? In terms of what we've been able to do, seeing loved ones, all of that. It was just, last week, right prior to the beginning of Lent, here in the Jesuit community at Community Mass, one of the guys gave a homily on moving into Lent, and he brought it down to two words, and the first word was carnival, Mardi Gras, but that actual word carnival, breaking it down to its Latin roots, meaning carnem vale, which means farewell to meat, which is what one would do at the beginning of Lent, giving up meat for 40 days. But he focused on that word farewell and saying, we ought to really reflect about, Lent this year being kind of a very gentle letting go of that which is not true or authentic to us. And I've really been thinking a lot about that, and especially the use of that gentle letting go. This past year has been, there's been intensity to this past year, and to spend Lent gently letting go of things might seem a little different, but it's really, for me, has been a great starting point with Lent. The other word he used was Lent itself, which comes from the Old English, meaning springtime. And he talked about springtime being a time of planting, of toiling, in terms of new life, and in terms of flourishing. And so the farewell and the flourishing are the two words I've really been focusing on, Jack, as we go into Lent. And it hasn't been so much as a cradle Catholic, Jack. Growing up, it was all about what you give up. And in grade school on Ash Wednesday, we would all get together, and it was kind of, you wanted to out-Lent one another in terms of something really, really dramatic. It's not like that this year. And I really think that's the real invitation from God, at least personally for me, in terms of, well, what do I need to say farewell to in a gentle way? And what do I, in terms of new life, and we place resurrection in that, in terms of flourishing as an individual, that I carry out into the flourishing of the community.
Oh, thank you. Now, you're someone who loves music, written and spoken word. How do you see art as a resource for prayer and reflection? And lately, what music and writing has been especially meaningful to you to reflect on and to enjoy?
Sure. Thank you for the question. And we've talked about such things before, Jack. Over the course, and music has always played a huge part in my own life. It's played an enormous part in the course of this past year. There was a piece last March when this was all starting in the LA Times called the Lost Art of Deep Listening. And it was basing this notion from this experimental composer, Pauline Oliveros, who really promoted this notion of deep listening. And basically what it was recommending was, just turn everything off, put on the headphones and listen to a full album, which is something really many of us don't do anymore. I certainly don't. But it was something I started at the end of last March and has been a regular practice. And it really has been a practice over the course of this pandemic. It's been interesting in terms of, as you ask, what has nourished, musically. I have my go-to singer-songwriters, of course, Leonard Cohen, Patti Smith, both in terms of content of what they sing about, but also in terms of they're almost like old friends. And so there's a great consolation there. I've listened to a heck of a lot more instrumental music over the course and a lot of different stuff. There's this great jazz scene in London, the Peckham Road jazz scene, with these up and coming jazz musicians producing really, really interesting, beautiful stuff. And a California harpist by the name of Mary Lattimore, who just sublime harp music, but what music has really always been, but in this time, and I would say it's true with all the arts, the Irish have that notion of what they call thin places throughout Ireland. Years ago, I hiked St. Patrick's Mountain, and I was talking to a Jesuit friend of mine, Fergus, after doing so, and he said, "Oh, you've been to one of the thin places," and I had never heard that term before. And he said, "Yeah," he said, "that's what we call these certain locations in Ireland where the space between this world and the eternal is porous." And I think, without sounding too esoteric, Jack, I think the arts can very much do that, and especially during a time where we really do need to nourish ourselves. Music can do that. If you look behind me, I have a Rothko hanging on the wall, not a real Rothko, obviously, but it's the same kind of thing with I think painting and with literature and poetry. It can foster the sacred, and it becomes kind of that portal between what I'm doing here and what God is inviting me to do as well.
Well, thank you, and I'm grateful to you for everything you enable our community to be. And as we close, is there a message you'd like to share with everyone?
Well, since you brought up the arts and literature, as you know, great poet and the founder of City Lights Books, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, recently passed away, just a month and a couple days shy of his 102nd birthday. And I've always been a great fan of Lawrence Ferlinghetti. So I've been going back, of course, to my beaten up version of Coney Island of the Mind. And he has that great long poem, I Am Waiting, which is kind of a litany for all the things he's waiting for, some sacred, some profane, some incredibly humorous, some heartbreaking. But, I think it's just those last three lines in it, Jack, where he says, "And I am awaiting perpetually and forever a renaissance of wonder." And I love that the use of the word renaissance there, because it's a renewal, it's a rebirth, and that sense of wonder and awe is very much in keeping with that kind of Lenten aspect I was talking about in terms of flourishing. So if there's a single word or notion, may we all kind of just take this time to embrace and to pursue a renaissance of wonder and awe in our own lives. So
thank you. Greg, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And for the
Absolutely.
your important work and the work of your colleagues in campus ministry to support our students, our faculty, and our staff. I'm grateful to you for all that you bring to our community. And I look forward to being with all of you again soon. Take care of yourselves and take care of everyone around you. For every Hoya, everywhere.